Joining me is former Hereford United chairman David Keyte. It's been 6 years, I think, since you last spoke to the media, and it was 10 years since you took over as chairman from Graham Turner. Firstly, what made you decide to become chairman of Hereford United back in 2010?
Well, let me start, Matt, by saying happy to have a chat to you after all this time. When you started, the fact it was 10 years ago, it's frightening how the time is going. But I would like to say that happy to answer all your questions, but don't be surprised if it counters an awful lot that the people of Hereford have been reading on social media in these past 5 or 6 years. A lot of which I've made no comment about before, but all I can give you is the true story as we experienced in our 4 years there. But the reason I got involved in the first place is that it's my hometown football club. Supported them since I went with my dad in 1964. And later on I was lucky enough to play as a schoolboy in the reserves about 40 times when Colin Addison was manager, and people like Wilf Grant and Bobby Wynn looked after us. So it was almost ingrained, if you like. When I picked up a newspaper, Hereford Times, it said that the Bulls were up for sale. By then I'd moved on, obviously, and moved away from Hereford as well, and managed to have a little bit of success in business, and thought I might look into that. So I did make an inquiry of Graham and Joan Fennessy, went across and met them. Hereford being Hereford, the first person I bumped into was an old school mate, Dave Benjamin, of Benjamin the Fish, in Church Street, and had a chat to him, and he said, well, if you've got any money, you ought to put it in the rugby club. And then walking from there to the football club, I bumped into Richard Prime, so, you sort of know straight away that Hereford you're not going to get away with anything on the quiet in Hereford. So. But anyway, all in all, I spoke to Graham, and I felt, I can't value it in the same way as they were hoping to receive. So I left it, and then a short time later, I had a call from Joan Fennessy to say that somebody else was interested, and that turned out to be a chap called Tim Russon, who I didn't know, but we got together and had a chat. Thought that sharing the cost of it, we'd go in and give it a go. But so that's how it started.
How did you get on with Tim at the start?
Tim, very pleasant. Very positive TV journalist, etc. Loved football. Talked a lot about the football. He thought he could get into the communications, marketing side of it. That we a little bit of research told us that the football club was a bit distant from the community, to say the least, at that time, and that maybe Graham was living in this, in that pure football world, not least because it was hand to mouth, and if that didn't work, then it was looking very difficult. So we thought that we could approach it in almost like as much of the off the field, take the club to the Hereford community, as well as recognising the importance of on the field results, and that's how we intended to go into it.
Simon Davey was your first managerial appointment. What made him the standout candidate?
Well, Graham was very helpful in the chats that we had, and in this regard, he got a file of about 30 candidates who'd applied for the job. I think it would take it back to John Truick being sacked, probably March time, towards the end of that season in 2010. And of course, Graham stepped in to make sure they stayed up. So he got a folder of applicants, and he said the best one in there, after sifting through it himself, was a chap called Simon Davey. But you won't get him, he said, because he's gone to Darlington. So we spoke to a few other people in the next week or two, and through a different route. Tim was quite pally with a guy called Steve Cottrell, who'd been manager at Cheltenham when Tim was reporting over there, and he was at Notts County, and this chap called Simon Davey had been asking about a couple of players, and in the conversation that he basically relayed to Tim was that this chap Davey had said he'd walk to Hereford for the job. So one thing and another, I managed to make contact with him and established that he was actually on a contract at Darlington, which was 7 days' notice either way. And that was because they'd had a big payoff to a chap called Steve Staunton, who'd been manager there, and it cost him a lot to make the change. And Simon said that he goes to the United States every summer for a 6-week coaching commitment that he has, that they'd honoured. That we worked something out that he had resigned from Darlington while he was away on this coaching course and was available to a new club on his return to the UK. And that's how it worked. And the Darlington chairman at the time, can't remember his name, gave me all sorts of grief in the press. But there we are. He'd given 7 days' notice and was available.
So I think the Darlington chairman was called Raj Singh. So that was your kind of first introduction into how controversial football could be.
Yeah, I guess so. But you'd be a bit naive to think that everything is above board and to the letter of the rules. You know?
So Simon Davey's first game we go to Crewe, we win 1-0. The second game we play Gillingham and draw 0-0. So for 4 points out of 6 games, and it's not a bad start. And then it went a bit wrong. What do you think went wrong in those remaining 8 games that he had?
Well, I think, to be fair to Simon Davey, we have to go back to the fact that Tim Russell and I got involved on the 4th of June. Pre-season training was set for the 1st of July. Graham had moved on, and we had 4 players, plus young Tyler Weir. I personally, without a manager, I contacted Kenny Lunt and Ryan Green. I caught Ryan just before he was going to top up his tan in Portugal. And agreed with them, and they signed. So the new manager was walking into 6 players plus Tyler Weir. And Simon started probably not much more than a week before pre-season. So, when you read about managers feeling you need 2 or 3 transfer windows to get to grips with your squad, he did remarkably well to get us up and running for when we went up to Crewe first game. And I remember we took about 900, I think it was 905 supporters went to Crewe, and you had a sense of, a new beginning for Hereford United. And better still, we managed to pinch a 1-0 win. In terms of, introductions to football and what have you, I remember in the boardroom, I asked their chairman, John somebody, could I put out a tannoy? Thank you to the travelling support, And he said, well, I've been doing this for about 25 years and I've never had that requested before. So that shows how green I was. But the message went out and thanked the travelling support and so on. I doubt if in the crowd, I doubt if anybody could hear it, but that's how we started. Then we lent against the coach, and Simon Davey told me that's the first time he's ever won the first game of the season in his whole career as a coach. But as you say, next game we were home to Gillingham the next week, and they were favourites to get promoted. I've got to say, I was disappointed that we didn't quite get 3,000 in the crowd. And maybe that was a telltale sign looking back, but we got 0-0. Then I think, it was August, the window was open, there was few players coming in and chopping and changing, and we first 10 games we'd won 1, drawn 2, and lost 7, and we were bottom with 5 points. And yes, it was a bit not what we wanted to do, what we came in to do, but and the game of Burton Albion, that maybe the 10th game, 9th game, I don't know, yet another system, and O'Neill Thompson played in the middle of the back three, which was a bit dramatic, and Burton pulls apart there. So we did have conversations in the boardroom. My personal view was that I wanted to continue with Simon. I got on with him, actually. Tim, I'm probably talking out of turn here, but I don't think Tim and maybe Grenville had quite got on with the chap. And I lost the vote 2-1 to dismiss him. But, you know, when you look back, there was a young chap called Colin Addison got us up into the Football League back in 1972, and his first games were identical. 1-1, drew 2, lost 7. And he went out, as we know, got a bloke called Eric Redrobe and took off. So who knows? Quite recently, Newport County were adrift at the bottom of the Football League. I think it was Mick Flynn went in, and they finished quite comfortably. So you can't tell. 10 games, 42, 46 matches. There's a long way to go, but we made that decision, and Simon Davey left us after 10 games.
With Simon and Andy Fensom's payoff, was it? Did you have to pay off the? I think they want a 2-year contract. Did you have to pay them off in full, or was there like an early settlement clause?
Yeah, no. The whole thing about manager contracts, player contracts, is the key paragraph I've always said was, what is the solution? You know, the settlement. So. Because I'm sure as sort of ordinary lay people looking on the outside, we all think, well, hang on, he's just signed a 5-year contract and he's gone to another club next year. And I'm not going as far as saying it's not worth the paper it's written on, but the key paragraph is, what is your agreed position for settlement? And that might be, as it was, 6 months pay when he's on a 2-year contract, or as I said earlier, he'd signed a contract that was 7 days at Darlington. So if he'd have been sacked there, he got 7 days' pay. So you hear on the telly that, you know, I don't know, Mourinho signed a 5-year contract, but the world of football doesn't seem to follow the contractual situation, let's say, very closely. If they want to move, they move. You know, players, agents, etc. There's a way of settling things and moving on.
So that was there a settlement with Simon then?
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, you've got to settle up, and we, you know, they pushed as hard as they could, and we ended up having to agree a figure and settle it up. But it was 6 months.
So you had to pay Simon and Andy 6-month settlement. The crowds had dropped. I think the Stevenage. Yeah. I think it was 1,400. I think we lost to Stevenage 4-1. So that money's not coming in. You then go to Jamie Pitman, who was the physio, and you know, he did turn things around, didn't he? Briefly.
Yeah, and initially it was that we got a game the very next night. I think we got a League Cup match against Exeter City, and so it was a matter of, can you just hold the fort tomorrow, Jamie? And Russell Holt was in the background with him. We lost that match, I think. But we set off and just wanted to get a bit of stability again. And the thinking was that, you know, because I think we'd be in October by then. And so let's have a look again at around Christmas mark and see how it's going. You know, he's a young lad, no experience, Hereford background, but you know, let's see how it goes. And as you say, we progressed. We were picking up points, and the season just unfolded, and there was no desperate need to change. We felt, And in the context of that is we got up to about maybe fourth, fifth bottom with a 6 or 7 point cushion. So not comfort, but and then later in that season, for lack of experience in the office, lack of experience in the boardroom, we end up getting a 3-point penalty for quite a bizarre transfer window issue involving Rob Purdy, if you remember. We were playing a game down at Torquay on a Tuesday night, and the transfer deadline was ended on the Monday, and the standard transfer deadline was 2:30. When you see all this last minute stuff, you had to get your fax off to the FA by 2:30. And what we learnt to our 3 points cost was that the exception to that is if you are taking on a player currently on loan and transferring his contract, if you like, into a full contract with the club, the deadline is 12:30. And I didn't know that, and the office obviously didn't know that. And we got our stuff in time for 2:30, but we ended up in the dock for failing to send the paperwork in on time, because Bob Purdy had been with us for about three months by then, and we were just confirming it was Oldham he came from, and we managed to have an agreement with Oldham that he would join us. So we right back in relegation threat because of that. But,
how did that mistake come out? Was it something that the FA had pointed out to you afterwards?
Yes, I'm pretty sure it would have been. And in actual fact, within a month or two, that was taken out of the rules, and they just sort of came up with a single deadline on transfer day. So I think probably it gave them the opportunity to think, well, that's a bit unrealistic. So, but it was in the book. You get a big book of rules, and should have been picked up.
You also had Lennie Lawrence was around the club that time. I think he was only there for about 6-7 weeks, but he seemed to be a positive influence. But then he went to Crystal Palace.
Yeah, we'd taken Jamie Pitman on, but although we were progressing, we felt, and he ultimately agreed. I don't think he felt he needed it, but we felt that an older hand in the background to advise would be a good move. And Lennie Lawrence was available, and he came in. It's probably already about December by then. And I remember meeting him at Wickham. We played down there and sat together in the stand and chatted, and we managed to get back, I think Matthew Mansett from memory scored with about 8 minutes to go to get to one each. And you can physically see him relax, because job done, because as you hear now on the wonderful Hereford FC radio commentary, it's all about football management and game management, and in the professional world you should be able to hang on to a 1-1 for the last 8 minutes, and he said, but we lost 2-1 because we kept flying forward or whatever, and Wickham beat us 2-1. But that was my meeting with Lennie Lawrence, and he came in and he was very good. It was a bad winter. We couldn't get on the pitch. We went up to Ludlow, and I remember him saying, we stood there, and he said it was probably the best surface that he'd actually coached on at Ludlow. He was enjoying himself, and the only thing he could do with was a car, and so I bought him a black BMW, I remember, from Phil Powell's car lot, and he loved it. So even though he moved on, basically he teamed up again with Dougie Freeman, and he rang me. He didn't know how to start. He was very apologetic, but he said he'd had this offer, financially obviously at a level that we were nowhere near, and it was 20 minutes from his back door, and he said, I've really got to take it. And he hadn't come in, to sign a contract or anything like that. He'd come in to help us, or help the manager. So we parted company on good terms, and he paid me for a black BMW over the next 9 months. So,
we had a good FA Cup run as well that season, Sheffield Wednesday in the 4th round. What do you remember from that run?
My memories, it didn't have the glamour of any big clubs. We played Hyde from Kent at home. We played Lincoln at home and got a draw and went up there. And Stuart Fleetwood and Matthew Mountset were scoring a lot of goals at that turn of the year, and we won 4-3 up there. Went to Wickham and pinched another win there. And that was a Tuesday night for some reason. I'm sure it was an evening match at Wickham. So there was no sort of glamour of a Ronnie Radford run, But we had a great trip up to Sheffield Wednesday. Took about 2,500 people up there, I think, and actually pinched the first goal. But it wasn't to be, and we were overrun in the end 4-1. So.
We managed to stay up that season. We drew with Bradford in the penultimate game. Stuart Fleetwood with a free kick. How would you assess the first season as chairman?
Well, I suppose a roller coaster, whirlwind. Didn't expect to be going into it and having to sack a manager. Delighted to have a FA Cup run, which is what Hereford United was all about in many ways. And the silliness of the admin thing, 3 points, putting us back into danger, and I suppose relief at the end that we'd come through it and we're still in League Two. Because the whole financial plan really was predicated on a belief that we were a League Two club, with the funding that Football League clubs get compared to non-league. So it was job done in the end. But you fairly swiftly in football, you're moving straight on to the next season. And we made a decision that Jamie Pitman had come through it, and we extended the contract for him to carry on. And then starting year 2 season, the second season, if you remember, we had the identical start in the first 10 games. We'd won 1, drawn 2, and lost 7. And yet, I think it probably, I would say to you, the second season was not positive. Obviously, the conclusion was relegation, but it was not positive from boardroom through to management in many respects. And I must admit that on the same start that Simon David had, we ought to have been looking at the management. But for some reason in discussions, everything seemed to be okay. On a personal front, I wasn't so close to the club. Just for the record, my wife Lorraine had kidney failure, and so it was a little bit in and out, my appearances, and I remember she was in hospital one weekend, and I missed the Gillingham at home game, and we lost 6-1. And yet on the Monday, it was described as a game of, they had 7 chances and scored 6, and we had 7 chances and scored 1. It could have gone either way, But I was a little bit conscious that we ought to be thinking of where are we going with a identical start to the previous season. And I'd say that probably was the main cause of not working so closely in the boardroom that season. We managed to extend the board from 3 people to 5 around October time, and I can remember in October we'd again decided that the manager needed some more experience above him, behind him, and we appointed Gary Peters. I actually like Gary Peters personally. I think he had a passion for football and a work ethic that young Jamie Pitman probably didn't have as a manager. And I'd probably just give you a description where Gary Peters would go out and probably watch 2 or 3 matches a week, evening matches. I can remember him sleeping in the manager's office on the settee to save driving all the way back to North Shropshire where he lived to come back the next day. Whereas young Jamie had to go and pick his children up at 3 o'clock from school. That experienced head in the football world. I mean, he was a Graham Turner-like experience. And we went to Swindon Town one day, and Harry Pell scored a header, would you believe? And we got a 3-3 draw late on. And when the whistle went, I got this image of Gary Peters running down the cinder track, tugging his badge, like a young kid, in front of the 200 or so Hereford supporters. And Jamie was just ready to go down the tunnel. And I just thought, yeah, that's what we need. But I lost that vote 3-2 in the boardroom. The 2 people that came on board at that point was Dave Keyte, who was Hereford United through and through, and Nick Nenadich came on. He had been on the committee and the vice presidents, so he came to the boardroom. And difficult for Dave Keyte. I think maybe in his first or second board meeting, and I'm saying I think we should make a change. And Dave was godfather to Jamie Pitman's 2 children, so very difficult for him to not support him. Lost that one 3-2, and then there was a bit of a dividing of the ways, I think, between Gary Peters and Jamie Pitman. Jamie, I'd have to say, was difficult to advise, give advice to, and I did speak to Gary Peters that Christmas. We went to Saxty's in Wide Marsh Street for a little bit of a drink and a meal with the people in the office and so on. And I spoke to Gary Peters and I said, well, how do you think it's going? You tell me when the right time is. I've got my views. And at the time, and we've spoken since, and he regrets it, but his first thought was that his job was to look after the manager. So he said, oh, he's doing okay, or whatever, how the conversation went. And I would have put Gary Peters in as the manager, and I think we'd avoided relegation. There's all sorts of talk about hoof football that you read about on the forums and so on, but in his view, we didn't have the players to play football, and that we needed to survive and then build from the following year. And it dragged on too far with hindsight, but we went to Gillingham probably in February at the stage. We went 2-0 up in no time, 8 minutes with Barkhausen scoring. They came back to 2-2 either side of half time. We went up 4-2 with only about 10 minutes left. And Gary was sat up with me, and he had a system where he would call the dugout. And I remember him saying there's 17 missed calls where he was just ignored with some tactical, let's sit on it, 4-2, play it out, game management. And as we know, they came back. Birdie missed a penalty, and we go down 5-4. And I think that was the trip back on the coach that night. I didn't have to push the discussion much further, and we met the next day. And so with only about 12 matches left, was it? Managed to make contact with Richard O'Kelly, who'd done a great job at Hereford in years gone by, and he did come in and help us out, but despite starting to turn the players and to turn the results, it was just last day too little